Hello YouTube, Matt here from Vectis 3D Models. As you've seen for the past months or couple of weeks, depending when you saw them, I put up some instructions how to build Baxter, or make Baxter from a kit that I am producing, or about to produce. As seen in possibly the last part, which was basically putting a completely different motor in your pug. Which is a slightly experimental, but it does work, and it works very well. So that's encouraging, especially for me, and the idea came up at 2 AM in the morning. So this idea came to me in the middle of the afternoon, amazingly. So not in the morning, for once. Could I put bigger wheels on a pug? Well, we're about to find out, I suppose. So I was digging through my drawers the other day. Not the actual drawers, but you know, and I found that in my workbench a pair of Allen Gibson 3'6" bogey wheels. Not quite sure what they were for, but I'm sure I'll find out at some point. So I've put them together on the 00 axle. As always, these wheels from Allen Gibson come with, I think it's an EM and a 00 axle. So we have a painted prototype of Baxter, so this is the B version, 3.5B, which will have some changes to compared to the first version, which was built on YouTube. Nothing too different. So this one, as you can see, I've got a wheel set in here, which is the 3'6" bogey wheel, which is not going to stay. It's just there to see if it would hit the bottom of the body shell, if it would actually work, and would it actually fit. And the answer was yes, it does fit and doesn't hit anything, but of course there's a bit of slack in there because of the smaller axle, so I expect it to come down a little bit. So I went looking for a set of a 3'6" driving wheels for a locomotive, or some sort of, you know, alternative. Now, as you've probably guessed, I was browsing around Wizard Models website, which is full of wheels, bogey wheels, driving wheels, etc. From Markets to Allen Gibson to various other ones. So I found some 3'7" size wheels. The 3'7" is basically the tyre size diameter, not the flange. The flange is actually about 15mm and a bit. And so basically I think I found them, and I thought, well, they're diesel ones, but they'll do. So I've ordered 2 lots, so 2 pairs of axles, so here they are. So these are diesel wheels, unfortunately. They're 12 spoke, and they're 3'6" diameter, 4mm with a 00 and a EM gauge axle, which you can see in the packet there. We've got plastic centres, steel tyres, so occasionally they do rust if you leave them in a moist environment or highly humid environment. I've had a few go myself. So just keep them clean and keep them dry in not too much humidity. And the axle size is 1/8 of an inch, so it's a bit too big for the pug axle, which I think is about 2.45mm compared to 3.2. So we need to bring that down a bit, but I've already got a cunning plan for that. So what I'm going to do is get some plastic tube from Construct or Plastruct or whatever it's called. I'm going to order some 1/8 tube, insert that into a wheel center, which will bring it then down to 1.9mm. Now, as you said, the axle, or as I said before, the axle size is 2.45mm, but if you look at the end of this axle here, it's actually a smaller diameter, amazingly 1.9mm, which matches the plastic tube. And this has got splines, so it should grip okay on that, and should be okay. You just pull the wheels off, but Also keep in mind for quartering, one's at half past and one's at quarter past, I think, or quarter to, can't quite remember. So that's always beneficial to keep a note of which way the wheels are, and what quartering they have. Now the other issue you're going to have is the crank pins. Now the crank pins on the Pug are made for the Pug and the Pug's wheels, so, or connecting rods, sorry, and the wheels of course as well. Now in the back of these wheels you'll see just there sort of looking like a hexagonal bolt, but it just keeps it in place and stops rotation, and that's all moulded in, and that's a bit of a problem. But you can push them out, not a problem, just push it out and pop it out from the back. But it's then fitting it to the wheel set that's not designed for it. So I bought some of these, which I use on all my kits and bits and pieces I put together, because they're just nicer to work with than soldering on something, and if something goes wrong you can unscrew them and put them back on. But unfortunately these are too thin and narrow on the actual bolt that goes on, or the screw that goes on the top, so unfortunately they were just bought for no reason. And I thought, well, they're plastic, or injection molded plastic on Allen Gibson wheels, so I had a look and I thought, well, I've got some drills, so 2mm, which will do the shaft of the crank pin. You can see one here, so there's a 2mm drill bit, which I'll drill the hole out for the crank pin. So it goes up to 2mm. Then in the back of the wheel, I will drill it out using quite an aggressive looking 3mm version, and it's all been done by hand, but you will have to glue them in, and that's the important thing. So mix up some araldites, pot it around the outside of it. Now also on Baxter, the wheel is basically a disc wheel with spokes going out from it, so it's got a backing to it, so you can't see all the way through the wheel. So I'm going to use some very thin plastic card to put a backing on that wheel, so you can't see through them like you can on these here. Then I'll prime it, paint it, and see how it looks and goes. So that's where we're at. Another idea, we'll see if it works. It'll probably look a little bit too close because Baxter's got a slightly longer wheelbase than a Pug, and the Pug wheels are 3 foot, and Baxter's is 3 foot 6 inch wheel size, so it's going to look a little bit compressed. There's also some other small modifications I need to do. This sanding box is too close, and obviously the brake blocks are too close, even though there's plenty of room around the 12mm axle, wheel size. So I'm going to do some sort of shaving off of the brake blocks, just give it a little bit more tolerance, if you like, so it will fit a bit nicer, and around here as well, just a little bit of filing. It doesn't need to be too much, maybe a bit of a Dremel, a little softer bits, and just remove a little bit of material. So that's what's coming up. I'll show you the modification when I get all the bits and pieces. This is 6 minutes already. There you go, that's Baxter all primed and ready to go. I'm still designing the lining, which is a lot of fun. So that's where we're at, and I'll follow up this video with another video with it hopefully all together. So just a small follow up to the Pug motor kit as well. Things have been changing all the time, and small changes, modifications. So the motor mount that you've seen in the video just prior would have been this one. However, as I've suggested in the video, it's a little bit difficult to do this if you're not quite sure what you're doing. And obviously with a motor and the position of the worm, it's quite critical where you're going to put it to make sure it connects and drives properly. So I've revised the motor mount here. You can see it's approximately a couple of mil taller. So this is to help you get it in the right position. So when you glue your motor in, once you've painted it black and stopped the light fading through it and all that kind of thing, primed it, painted it, etc. When you mount your motor, which I have one here, which will go on Baxter B in the background, you can see here I've changed a few things, and what this will do is now you glue your motor so at the top, the black piece of plastic on the top of the motor is level with the top of this motor mount, which means you don't have to measure it all up, guess, second guess, make sure it's off the bottom of the keeper plate, etc, etc. So it should be at the right height and the right place. The wires for the motor go through either side, pop out the back, and solder onto the terminals out the side, keeping them out the way hopefully. So that's where we're at with that, and that's what you'll get in your kit. So that's a small addition and a small change on the motor mount just to help you get your motor in the right place. So you'll look forward to that in your kit. So just to help you along a little bit and make it a little bit more simple. So just to bring you up to speed on things, the last section was about putting different wheels on Baxter, making it slightly taller and making the wheels slightly bigger. So I've gone ahead with the conversion using the Allen Gibson 3'6" diesel wheels, which I bought off Wizard, and then I've converted them to the 1.9mm shaft for the main driving axles of the Pug, which was actually quite straightforward, so it wasn't too bad. So you can see them on here. This is all loosely assembled. So if I just tilt it like that so you can see. So I've painted all this since the last time. The body's been painted and the wheels have been painted. So these are the 3'6" Allen Gibson wheels. I've made various modifications to it. So to begin with, I've drilled out the back for the crank pin, so it will take the Pug crank pins. I've drilled out the front, drilled out the back with a 3mm drill. I then potted that in Aerodite so it won't move. Sanded that back and put a 10 thou piece of plastic card on the back, a round piece, then glued that to the back to give it the disc effect. In the centre I've actually reamed that out to properly 1/8 of an inch, so that's the correct size for the axle for Allen Gibson. But I then put in a piece of tube which is 1/8 of an inch, which has a 1.9mm, amazingly, the same size as the axle or end axle on the Pug. So brilliant. So I drilled that out slightly just to enlarge it, and then just pushed it on, and it's the right back to back, so 14.5mm, I think it is off the top of my head. And that was all good, and it runs nicely, it's smooth, it's good, painted up nicely. So that's the end of that section of modification. I don't think I can do any more to it. So that's the end of that section, and we'll go on to what paints I've used. So paints, what paint to paint Baxter with. So this has been primed in a red plastic primer, the body shell that is, and the cylinders and anything plastic. So that's been primed in red Halfords primer, plastic primer. Now the small differences is some reds are slightly brighter than others, so it's been a difficult task to try and find the right red to go on this model, because Baxter has various reds, not just a plain red but also sort of orangey red as well. So we'll go through the orangey red bits first. So if I tilt this up so you can see, there we go. So the connecting rods, one there and one just in front of us, they're all an orangey red. So I've used Scarlet Red. This is from Valeo, has 70.817. This is an acrylic, and that seems to go quite well and match quite well. Also the springs here are orangey red as well, slightly different to the body colour, and just painted in black as well. So that's the only parts, and most of them were primed in white to give it a little bit more, just a little bit more brightness, back colour, just to bring it up a little bit. It takes a couple more coats of the paint, but it's not too bad, and then they're lacquered and finished. And if you want to dirty them up, like the springs for example, just give it a bit of shade, then that's alright as well. Now the body colour is a bit of a challenge, because I couldn't really find a nice flat red, because Baxter's colour is red, but it's a sort of flat, quite deep red. It's very challenging to find something similar. However, I found some paint at Halfords which is called Toolbox Red, and this was quite a nice deep colour. It's not as bright as what it appears on the camera, but it was just about right for me, so I bought some of that. So once this was primed, and after 8 different red tests and trials and all that kind of thing, I think I found about the right one. So this whole loco, cylinders, and wheels were all primed in red primer, plastic primer from Halfords. That was left to dry 24 hours. I then came back, rubbed it down a little bit, filled in any areas, put some more primer on. Once I was happy with the finish, I then masked up anything which was red and done the black first. So cab, running plate, top of that, and the smoke box, and the tops of the tanks, and the floor, and the sides were all masked up. So that was done with just a satin black from Halfords spray can, rattle can, and then I went back and masked up the black areas, and then sprayed the red, which is also a rattle can. So if you have any small little nicks or breaks when you pull the masking tape off, I did find that this blood red was quite good, 72-010 I think it is, and that's from Vallejo as well, which is acrylic. So it's quite nice to patch up in areas if it's not too far off, but you can mix it up and make it darker with other colours. Yeah, and that works quite well, and it looks quite nice. It's gone through the ugly phase of touching bits up and with some black, and the buffers are all painted in black, ready for the next stage as well. And the next stage is actually transfers. So I've actually received the transfers now, and I will give you some details, where to find them, the price, and how long it took. 'Cause it took a very long time. You don't really realise how much transfers and how much lining is on this small locomotive, but we'll go into that next. So transfers, this is the fun bit, or not so fun. So this has taken quite a long time to do, and I was up to about 3 o'clock in the morning finishing these off to get these ready for this kit. Now I'm going to say one thing, the layout of this transfer sheet may have changed, because the chap who's done them has moved it around, realigned it, and tried to make use of the space a bit better. So these are the transfers for Baxter. There's a few spares, so there is extras, so don't panic if you've messed one up. Now there are 2 which we'll ignore because they're for something else I've got working on, so we'll avoid those 2, but the rest is for Baxter. So This sheet is produced by Precision Transfers, John at Precision, or Precision Labels I should say is his actual name. There will be a link for these, so if you just want to buy a set for your model, you can just go on there, pay the bill, and he'll send them out, print them, send them out. And he's pretty quick and pretty good. So these are all designed by myself, but then modified by John, who sent me an invoice at 3 o'clock in the morning, or 4 o'clock in the morning. Bless him. And he's done an absolutely fantastic job, and even gone above and beyond what I was expecting. So the transfers for Baxter are difficult because it's not one colour, and secondly the lining isn't white, it's an off-white sort of pink rosy kind of colour, and plus there's orangey reds and deep reds, etc, etc, and even some wood chucked in there just for some fun. So if I go through these bit by bit and try and keep them all on screen. So start from the top left. So these two here, two circles, are for the bottom of the dome, and there's some lining that goes round the bottom of the dome just where it meets the boiler. These next sections here are for the boiler bands, and there is an actual boiler band extra which I didn't see, so there's some extra there just in case. The next ones along, these are the running plate, so black and pinkish lining. Going along to the next bit, just here, these are for the sandboxes. Again, you've got two spare if you require, so these just fold around, hopefully, if I've got the measurements right. These ones here, here, and here are for the steps. So I think the narrower ones for the front steps, and the slightly bigger ones are for the back steps. But you have one on the front facing you and the one on the back facing the buffer beam. So there's two per step, but again there are spares around for you to do them, so not a problem. Moving down, these are the top of the cab, which goes from the side round to the front, or up to the window opening. So that's the sides, and I think that's another side down here. These bands here, as 2, 2, 2 and 2, are for the cylinders. So the cylinders have lining on them as well. I mean, you have to just run a black line along the edge. Moving along, these are for the back plate of the cab, and they should fit quite nicely. Again, you'll need to paint the top of it black and the bottom of it black where the rivets are, because these transfers all fit within the rivet lines, so you'll have to go over the rivets and paint them black. It's just easier that way, and trying to form a transfer over a rivet is not great sometimes, so I just want to make it a bit easier. So moving back across, I got some blue lines here, and these are for the buffer shanks, and just sort of on the end of the, not buffer shanks, sorry, the buffer housing, and the slightly raised section towards the buffer, back of the buffer head. So there's a blue line, and staying on the buffers, I'm going to skip ahead. Just down here you can see some red rectangles. Now Baxter's only got 3 out of the 4 plates painted, don't know why. They're an orangey red, but what John's done is even put the writing on the plates, which when I sent them they were just red, they didn't have writing on, and he's added writing on it, and I said I didn't really expect that, but there you go, more detail, bless him, brilliant as always. These just here, just below, are for the water tank fronts, so facing the spring and the sandbox. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. We'll move along to these. We'll go back the other way now. So 4 of those. Then you've got the motion bracket just here. These are the back ones, and these are the front ones. Again, spares. Again, the cab just here. That's the middle of the cab, so just behind the whistle. you got another front of a cab here, one there and two just here, and these of course are the water tanks. So you've got side of the water tanks, so you've got that one and that one, and there's also some brass goldy leaf in there as well. This brown one here is for the back of the cab, and these go onto the back of the cab as so, and that is your transfer sheet, and that should cost you about £20 or somewhere around there, £20, £22, something like that. And that'll be available from Precision Labels, not Transfers, and I will have that link on the PDF and on the product page if you require them. Alright, so I've put some transfers on the model, as you can see. I've pretty much done the back end of it, not all of it. I still need to do the backs of the steps here with the small little rectangles. But you can see I've done the cab back plate here, which was quite challenging, but it looks pretty good to me. So it's one on the inside and one on the outside. This has been varnished, so it's all sealed in. The buffer beam was an absolute pain and a nightmare, to be quite frank. This is actually the second attempt because there's so much sort of bolt heads and rivets. The hook area just here is a little bit crumpled up because there's a rivet either side, and then there's 4 hex bolts around the outside of that. So when fitting this back one, what I did was cut out the middle section and apply that separately, and then around these sort of hex nets, there's 4, one there, one there, one there, and one just down there. I've cut little slits on the transfer just so it can sort of open out and flex around where it needs to flex. I do use some setting solution and softening solutions for the transfers, but it just wasn't enough or isn't enough, so you'd have a rethink maybe on the CAD slightly, maybe open it out slightly, who knows. But the front is a little bit more easier because there isn't so much furniture around as you like, but or if you like. But you can see it all fits together quite nicely. The colours are great, so he's done a smashing job on that. I've glued the buffers on after the transfer, of course, so I could get a nice easy laying of a transfer across the beam. What I've done after that is just painted up to the line of the transfer, so any black that I needed to add in, like the edges here or the top of the running plate just here, and the same on the cab as well. Around the outside I've just added some black, but it looks great. The colour looks good, and you can just about see on the inside the back of the cab plate there. I've also added on the back of the roof, which you may or may not have noticed, I roll it back, you can see a nice wood effect transfer with blue and yellow. So that looks really good, brings a little bit more authenticity to it, so that looks great. And what I'll do now is I'll cut this bit and I'll come back, and what we'll do is we'll add the side transfer to this tank side here, and I'll show you what I use to put the transfers on. But it's 2 setting solutions, one's microset and one is microsol, and they have 2 different uses, and I will talk you through which one's best for which bit. Let's just put it this way, the microsol is probably best for the buffer beams due to its complexity on the rear. But other than that, I still need to put transfers on the buffers themselves. When the glue is dry, I don't want them moving around too much. So I'll go into the side of the tank, and you can follow that as I go, and you can see how it's done. Okay, so looking at the side of the model, this is what we're working with. Make sure it's clean of any fibres or any dirt, anything like that. And what you'll need to do is as I say, just check it, make sure it's clear and fine. You need to put your transfer in the water, which I've already done, so it'll take a few seconds to come off of the backing paper. And then what I mentioned before is I use various solutions. So as this is a nice flat side without any too much detail or anything like that, and we avoid the rivets anyway because the transfers are designed to go inside the rivets, so it's not a problem. So as it's nice and flat, I'll be using micro set. Now this is for mainly flat surfaces with a small amount of indentation, sort of like panel lines or gaps, and this really helps with just non-complicated surface details. If I did have a transfer over the rivets on the outside, I'd probably have to use micro salt because it softens it even more and it's quite aggressive, and this is for very irregular surfaces, but it also sort of fades the transfer in to the actual surroundings. So you'll need some tweezers. You can even find mine, that'd be great. Pull out the transfer from the solution, or water I should say. It's just normal warm water. Do be careful with any printed areas. So you can see it's nice and wet, as you can see. Just let it dry off slightly. This is all one sheet of transfer, so you've got to be careful putting it on. So once the water or excess water just comes off of that, I use some micro set and just put it on the surface. This helps adhesion and it also helps soften it slightly, just so you can move it around a little bit, or it can form any sort of irregular surfaces. Not too irregular though. So mainly flat surfaces with a small amount of indentation, no rivets, nothing like that. Okay, so with that done, have your transfer here. We've got some lovely brass or gold plate in the middle and the writing as well. So you've got to try and get this in the middle. We'll try to. So I'll try and match it up as best I can and just slide it off. I want it just inside the rivets. Just needs moving a little bit to the top corner. Dragging back this way slightly. There you go. Okay, I think that's okay. I think it might need to come up a little tiny bit at the top. It looks reasonably square and in the middle. Can use a cocktail stick, but unfortunately I don't have one to hand right now. Okay, so that looks about in the middle. So what I'll do now is I'll just sort of let that go off a little bit. I'll probably use the same paintbrush with a little bit of micro set on it and just sort of squeeze out any air bubbles there. And then when you're sort of happy with the position, what I do is sort of have a damp, you can use a damp sponge, but I find that tends to move the transfer around. So it's just a bit of damp water that I use on a sort of kitchen towel. So you just sort of dab it to just squeeze any fluid out from underneath the transfer. Looking pretty good, not too bad. You can probably see in the light there's a little bit of wrinkling in the centre. So we'll just let that settle down. Let's make it nice and flat. You just do need to sort of adjust it slightly just to ease it into position. Do expect a little bit of this, but not too much. Dampen that a bit. Yeah, that's not too bad. I've still got a little bit of wrinkling in the centre. It's going away as I speak, so it's not too bad. So there you go, that's the transfer on. I'll just let it dry off a little bit. Get any dirt off there. And then what I'll do when it's secure and it's happy, I'll then go around the outside with black paint very carefully. I've got a reasonable margin here, but not too much. And that will just blend it all together like it has the back plate here. And I've still got one to do up the top and go round on the inside. So that's how I do it. And that's how the transfers are made. And as I say, there's still lots to do. So I'll put in another little snippet later on when I'm a little bit further along. Okay, so a little bit of a follow-up. You can see I've progressed quite a lot. So really we've gone from the rear, which you can see here. I've even managed to put one of the little printed plates, or transfer plates as I call it, on the top of that buffer, just to have a look at it, and it looks very good. So this is really just running through a few areas which you may have trouble with in terms of snagging and little bits of detail which you could be advised about before going into putting transfers on it. So you can see I'm using micro set, micro sole. Soles for more sort of, so we say, rough faces in terms of detail, like the buffer beam for example. In fact, I'm going to go back and probably redo bits of the rear buffer beam, because it's quite a lot of detail, rivets and hex heads and all that kind of thing. But it's come out alright, you can see there, nicely displayed and all that kind of thing. It's the centre bits where the hook is, the black area, which is a bit of a problematic area. So what I would do is cut out the middle transfer for the hook, or hook plate I should say. So cut that out. What I've done on the front, which come out a lot better, is cut 3 slits in it, one on the edges of the diamond if you like, and one vertical for the hook. Then what I usually do is put a load of, well not a lot, but quite a lot of micro sole onto the surface and just rest it over the top. Wait for a bit and it sort of sucks it all down to the surface, and it's come up really well on the front, so it makes me want to go back and do it again on the rear. So moving along the side, you can see the transfer for the side is on, and that's all been filled in with black around the edge. I've also done the top of the cab as well, which has come out really nicely. I haven't done the running plate yet, or too much of the steps apart from the one at the front just down here. So that's all been put on and all fits really nicely, so it's brilliant. That really has come out really nicely. If we move around, this is all one transfer around the front, from the side to the front. That wraps itself around, so a little bit of micro set and a little bit of micro sole sort of as it curves round. But anything reasonably flat it's okay with. This one here, this single transfer here, which curves round into the recess, I've had to cut the corner off which goes around the boiler, but apart from that, that's the only little niggly bit you need to adjust. So just cut the corner off the narrow bit in the centre, or not quite the centre, to the left of the centre and to the right of the centre, and it will just sit there quite nicely. The middle one, not too bad if you cut it quite close around the curve, that fits in quite nicely. I put a bit of microsole on the back and a little bit of microset around the bottom, and that's come out quite nicely. But you can see I haven't done this side at all, so this is all clear to do. So I've done the front of the tank as well, you can see here, so that's been put on, done around the outside, and the sandbox as well, just around the front. A little bit of black on the edge and on the other side, which is a bit tricky to get to. I usually put a little bit of black on the end of say a cocktail stick and just run it along the edge, and that filled it quite nicely. So the boiler bands are all on, pretty much all of them. I think there is an extra one here which I might put in a bit later, we'll see. But I've also, and this was a pain, so there's another little snaggy bit, the bit round the dome. Yes, the bottom of the dome is lined. I must have been mad when I was thinking of that, but I've used a little bit of both as two dome bases transfers. So what I would probably do if I were you is cut it into two semicircles, cut around the inside, so you've got this bit here, because I did it all as one bit and dropped it over the top, but that didn't work. So you may need a bit from another spare dome transfer, just to fill in a gap, because I think I'm about 2 mil short. So I've made this up from 2 transfers, but it fits in quite nicely, and you can see it's going all the way around and the other side, and that's been done with a bit of microsole just to blend it in and flex it round, and that's come out really nicely. On the buffer beam, which I've only just done on the front, you can see it's come out a lot better in the middle, and it's fitted really nice onto there. That's been done with microset, the main panel. This is just one transfer of the middle cut out, and that's gone on in one piece, as have all of these, so it looks painted and varnished, but it's actually not. But I will varnish it eventually. So that's been done, and the middle bit, as I already mentioned, was put on separately. Put some micro sole in the centre and just draped it over the area, which of course, as I mentioned, the transfer had 3 slits in, one horizontal and 2 vertical on the edge for the rivet, which does cause it to bubble up a little bit, and that's gone completely down over that area and looks really good. The only other bit I've done, as I said, is this step here at the bottom. That's the only other bit I've done before moving around to the other side. But it looks great. It's coming on really nicely. It looks the part, and this will probably take all weekend to finish. This has taken me 2 days, an afternoon and a day, I should say. So I'll crack on and finish it off, and before I leave you, I will also show you the back of the cab. There's the fake wood with blue line and dark blue and also yellow. The other bit I've done, which has just fallen off in front of me, where is it? There we are. So this is the cab backing plate. That's all done, ready to go on. This has been varnished just to seal it all in, but that's ready to go as well. So it's all coming together, and I'll fill in a few minutes at the end with the finished article, hopefully. So as you can see, after all the transfer action, everything has had its transfers applied. Happy to say they all fit absolutely fine. The running plate one may need a little trim and just bringing together, but other than that, everything else seems to be okay. The rear step, maybe a little bit, we'll see, but at the end of the day, everything fits together okay, everything seems to work okay, and you can see there everything's on, varnished, buffer beam, which was fun to do. and also the buffers, which have been done. There's two separate pieces on there, so lining and the plate as well. So that really takes care of the lining. The springs have been added after varnishing, so you can see all the lining's been done behind it. All the handrails are on the cab, etc. And now we actually get to the cab. Now there's only a few bits to add to this now, which is the motor option, whichever you pick, the cab back plate, which I'll move over there, and also the roof, which you see there. Now if you've gone for a motor kit, which this one is going to have, I've changed a few little bits again, just to make it easier. So this unit now is a complete drop-in unit, just the motor itself. So if I can actually pull that out, which I probably can't, what you'll see, if I hold it up, is the wires for the motor now come off the top, go around the back and come up the front. And what I've added is some copper tape, which is self-adhesive, although when you heat it up it doesn't really want to stick. And I've soldered the wires from that onto the front, which you can see either side, so positive, negative. If I move those out of the way. This is to allow you to install the flywheel before putting it on, so this is all one thing now, and I can just drop it in with the wires soldered on and ready to go, which means I can also solder these on later and also not fiddle around too much with the wires coming from, if you've added one, a firebox flicker, which I've added on there. So you don't have to glue on the flywheel last anymore. You can just drop it in, solder the wires for the main pickups onto the sides here, and then solder the additional wires for the firebox flicker, if you're going to have one, onto the side. And then we start testing, which is even more fun. Everything's painted, everything's ready to go. This hasn't been glued in yet, but you can see as well, before gluing anything in, like the motor holder, make sure you've got enough clearance around the top for the sticky outy bit of the cab, which is just recessed, and that should have enough room, and that's fine. This has all been ballasted down now, so it's got all of its weight in, the boiler and also the tanks. Weighs about 51 grams with the ballast in, so it's a reasonable weight for a small engine. So now really it's on to finishing off, so I'll move on to that, add it on the end, and then we'll have the fully painted, lined Baxter, which is quite nice to see. Version 2 for me, but version 3 for everybody else. So after 8 hours of running in on this particular prototype, it's running a little bit better now. Still little few things to sort out, but as you can see on the back, I've now installed the back head. As I showed you previously, I've changed a few little bits to make it slightly easier ish. It's still pretty difficult, so I might have a look at some other areas to improve, mainly wire runs and where to put the wires, and I may extend the motor mounting, so you can put a little or glue some sort of copper strip, clad strip on the actual motor mount itself, so it's easier to solder wires onto, like for the motor and for the firebox flicker if you wish to install one. So this one has the firebox flicker installed already, and has been running very well. And as you can see, all you'll see in the back here now is the drive shaft just popping out the top. Just needed to enlarge the hole slightly, not too much. In terms of fixing it in, and I imagine people sort of are a little bit concerned if you glue your motor and you will never get to it, especially if you need a service or anything goes wrong. What I've done with this is I haven't glued the back head in. What I've done is I've used some satin varnish, which is acrylic. So if I just run a knife down the bottom or around the top where I've just laid some varnish. You can't see it, so it's clear, which is great. You can just run a knife down there and pop, possibly with a blade underneath, and pop this up, so it's not too difficult to get out if required. Obviously if the motor's done, you'll need a new mount and you'll need a new motor, and you can probably strip the bits off of it you need, like the flywheel or the worm. But overall it's looking great, it runs well, and the last two bits to put on it is the back of the cab and also the cab roof just here. So that said, let's do that and run it even more. So there we are then, all running and ready to go. So hopefully you've watched all the instruction videos all the way through, from the chassis to the body and to this one where I've gone a little bit nuts and added some extra features on it. But as you can see, once it's built, transfers on, it really does come together quite nicely. A few small extras and tips I'll add on the end of this is transfers. When you do apply them and start sort of moving around the model, if you do one side and then you seal that transfer in with some varnish just to protect the print, sometimes if you somehow scratch it, it sometimes takes the ink off and the numbers or the letters or a bit of the lining. So just be very careful when you start rotating the model around. I would suggest adding some varnish over just to protect the transfer at least. So because you do get some spares on that sheet, but only a few, and mainly for the more difficult ones, which may be a bit tricky, like the dome or the front buffer beam or rear buffer beam or the steps. You do get a couple of sides just in case, but just be wary. The carrier film is extremely thin, but just be careful, take your time, make sure there's plenty of water or all the microsole stuff that you put on, and just take your time, no rush, and make sure the surface is nice and glossy. With that said, these kits are available to pre-order. Now what I mean by that is you will need to basically send me an email and say, I'm interested in buying one of these, could you make one for me? And I'll say yeah. It will take about a week, maybe two, but I'll print you one, it'll be fresh off the printer, ready to go. Now I do that because it cuts down on wastage, it keeps the price down, and it also means I'm printing for what people need or want at that point in time. If you don't buy it, then it will just stay on the website and somebody else will buy it. Straightforward. But they'll only be made in ones or twos depending on how many people want one. Each batch is basically, one print is a print of two, so you'll get two lots of everything, two bodies, two sets of everything basically. So there'll be enough to do in one order a print of 2, so there'll be 2 going anyway at each point, and that spare will just go on the website and wait for somebody to buy it. The transfers are available through Precision Labels. The link is in the PDF, which will go on the website shortly. All the instructions are on the item link, and the links will be below. The body kit itself, because it's split into 2, the body kit and the motor kit. The body kit is £45, because there's a lot more to it now. Prices on Shapeways are higher than that, even though you get less, and less detail as well. And in fact, the Shapeways one has now been taken off sale completely, so you won't find it on there. I will ship worldwide, just about. I've sort of taken the price into consideration, so I can ship worldwide if required. And yeah, basically that is it. So it's £45 for the body kit and £18.50 for the motor kit if you want to have it on there. You don't have to, but you can if you want to. All the other extra details I put in this, like the motion and the extra wheels or the newer wheels, obviously that changes quite a few things. I don't recommend it, but if you're skilled enough, by all means have a go. Mine runs, so that's pretty good for me, well, pretty good going for me anyway, considering it was just an idea. And it looks quite a lot nicer with bigger wheels on, but if you can only manage the smaller ones, it's not a problem. That you probably have more reliability anyway. But thanks for watching all the videos and following the process of this kit. I hope you find it interesting and possibly maybe you want to buy one. If you have any questions, pop them below and I will answer them as best as I can. If you have any questions on the kit build, please post it on the videos or email me, vectis3dmodels@btinternet.com, or visit the Facebook page and send me a message on there, which is Vectis3D and just have a look for those, and hopefully you'll find me quite easily. But thanks for watching. I hope you found it interesting and possibly entertaining if you like that kind of thing. And yeah, hopefully we'll see a few orders in the future for these, and we'll keep doing what we're doing, and who knows, maybe there's something new on the horizon, but we'll let you know when. Thanks for watching, and catch you in the next one.